Welcome to Whisky Talk, Malts and Music, brought to you by the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, here in the vaults in Leith. My name is Vic Galloway. I'm a broadcaster, author, musician and music journalist. And the idea of this podcast is to bring together single cask, cask strength whiskies and music. I ask creative people to pair up 4 drams with 4 pieces of music. We discuss their selections and we go off on tangents into their lives and careers. I hope you enjoy. Slán Java. Olaf Furniss, welcome to Whisky Talk, Malts and Music. Good to have you.
Good to be here.
I know that you are a mad music fan and you work in the music industry, and also you know a lot about whiskey and you love it. We're going to cover all of that and loads more over 4 drams. We've got our dram team, Scotch Malt Whisky Society packs here. Let's open them.
I was going to say, can I open it now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a nice wee envelope in it as well.
Yes, indeed, with our tasting notes. And 4 drams, 4 pieces of music, a little bit of an explanation as to why you've chosen each piece of music, and then a little bit about your life and career and your love of whiskey and music. Let's go for our first dram, which is a fruity prescription, and it is part of the spicy and sweet flavor profile group.
Okay,
so
let's get that in.
Lovely.
You know, this room is actually the first place I ever visited at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. I think in 1993. I came for a tasting and there was a sort of portly, good-natured guy with a bow tie that gave us the most amazing whiskey talk. And as a result of that, I joined.
So that was you came in 94 and you joined in 95, basically.
I think I came in 93 and joined in 94.
And you've been a member ever since?
Yes.
So you've got to be one of the first people to really join the Scotch Malt Whisky Society.
Yeah, I guess in the first few thousand. I mean, the thing was that I kept forgetting to renew my membership, so they wouldn't make me pay a brand new membership, but they'd give me another number with a different card. But I featured it in a magazine. I was a features editor. It was it was all about the internet. It was published by the first chain of internet cafes called Siberia. I basically just wrote about anything I wanted to, but just found some sort of spurious internet angle to mention in it. And so I did something in 1996 about the Malt Whisky Society. And the guy who's sadly passed away, actually, who was manager here, he did an interview and we sent a photographer along, and then we kind of, in the early days of Photoshop, made his face a little bit green and gave it a bit of a green hue to sort of make out he drunk too much whiskey. But it was my way of kind of getting in a plug for whiskey even back then. But I guess at that point when I joined, they were still closing distilleries. They were, at that point they were scared that whiskey drinkers were going to die out. So,
well, there's been a huge turnaround in that.
I mean, how times have changed. We can talk a bit about that as well.
And membership's going up year on year. It seems to be something that's really grabbing people's attention. And hopefully, talking a little bit about these malts and some music will inspire people even further. Let's have a sniff of the first one. So this is a fruity prescription, spicy and sweet. A couple of the tasting notes. The initial nose was ridden with creamy vanilla custard and ripe yellow fruits. Lots of plums, mushy banana, sultanas, fresh parsley and citrus curds. Some pineapple chunks duked in fizzy sherbet. With water, we found pine cones and wood saps along with mossy tree bark, quince jelly and dried papaya. There you go. I mean, that's a fruity prescription in words. The nose is amazing, isn't it? And particularly fruity.
You know what I love as well is that this is, I mean, how strong it's, because they're all cask strength. So
55.3%.
Yeah, but you can drink a regular whiskey from the shops, at 40%, and it's smoother than that.
Oh yeah. Well, let's have a sip. And this is a lowland whiskey as well. Very, very easy to drink.
Yeah.
And smooth. And as you say, maybe 10 or more % stronger than something you might buy in a shop, but as smooth as anything on the tongue.
and 18
and in the back
years
of the,
old.
the throat as well. I mean, it's got a very small kick, but you know.
I think what's
powerful.
interesting is that it has it's got loads of flavor, but it dissipates really quickly. So it's kind of, you've got it and then it's sort of gone. You know how some, not just the PE whiskies, but some whiskies, the taste lingers for a long time. You get that kind of ongoing taste, you know, 10 minutes later, you still got the memory of it. Whereas, you know, some whiskies, it's more of a like immediate impact. You're like, yeah, great.
Yeah.
And then whoosh, off it goes.
Now, you got particular taste in whiskey. I mean, I'm much like myself. I'm sure you'll give any of the single cask strength stuff a go and enjoy it. But you particularly like sort of far more flavoursome peaty whiskies, don't you? That's your particular thing.
Yeah, the first whiskey other than blends, and we'll come to that in a bit, but you know, the first malt whiskey that I really liked was Lefroy. And I was like, this is amazing because it doesn't taste like the stuff that I drank and threw up on, right?
Right, okay.
As a teenager. I mean, I think I first tried Lefroy when I was 19 and it was like a revelation to me.
Yeah.
So I've always had a real soft spot for peaty ones, but then I also generally like sherried whiskies. Unfortunately, so do lots of other people, and sherry casks are in short supply. So
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I believe that Macallan actually bought their own sherry casks and essentially rent them out to the sherry industry, so they've got a guaranteed supply. But the sherry can reuse their casks, whereas bourbon, they're only able to use them once. So with bourbon, they're almost like a byproduct. You get them for a fraction of the price. But as demand for sherried whiskies has gone up, so as or sherry casks, so is the price. So, you know, that's become more of a luxury in my adult life than it used to be. But I think that I also have a sort of punch up for kind of quite weird or unusual whiskies. You know, where it's got a flavour that I've not experienced before. I like the oiliness. I like ones that have got a real sort of oiliness about them, and
something with extreme flavour, basically.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I like a lot of extreme music as well.
Yeah.
I, you know, like yourself, you know.
Yes.
So I mean, there's plenty of sort of accessible music, and I think most of this will be. But
I like
you know,
life with a bit of flavour, you know.
Yeah.
I want adventure in life. I want things that taste good and sound good and are interesting to read or watch or whatever. So I'm with you on that. But this, I mean, it's fully flavoursome, but it's also very smooth. It's very palatable and easy to drink. What have you paired this one up with then, musically?
I've paired this up with the Soup Dragon's Whole Wide World. Now, when I was in my mid-teens, there used to be a guy on Radio 4th called Colin Somerville, who was a newsreader, and he went on to become the head of programming, but he was a newsreader at the time, and they gave him his own radio show, which I think went from 10 p.m. till midnight, and he just used to play loads of Scottish bands, and I was so inspired by what Colin was playing that I started my own fanzine, and I went to the local branch of Rough Trade, which is called Fast Forward. It's in a basement in Alva Street in Edinburgh. The owner now owns Love Music record shop in Glasgow, and that whole period was all these kind of indie bands. But the Soup Dragons were they had like a kind of bit more humor around them as well.
Well, they're called the Soup Dragons.
Yes, exactly, like in the Clangers.
Named after a character in the Clangers.
And so I picked this one because it's, you know, for me, you know, I was a bit too young to have been able to see the Buzzcocks and, you know, who they were obviously inspired by at that point. And there's a whiskey connection to this as well. So I kind of, Colin's show inspired me to do a fanzine. Sandy from Fast Forward gave me lots of records. I bought the Soup Dragons, and this song is really short. It's under 2 minutes. So I thought it matches really well to this whiskey because you've got the impact, it's great, and then it's gone.
Well, as you were saying, yeah, the taste is there. It's fully flavoursome, and then yes, it disappears quite quickly. It's not sort of lingering. And a 1.5 minute song by the Soup Dragons, Whole Wide World, released in 1986. Maybe the pinnacle of C86, that kind of indie sound at the time, and yeah, a legendary Scottish band, one of the Bells Hill bands, alongside the Vaselines and the BMX Bandits, and later Teenage Fan Club and so on. Their biggest hit, which I'm sure people who maybe don't know this particular song, is "I'm Free," cover of the Stones, which was a massive hit. It was top 5 in the UK, and it was I think it did well in the States, and then they had some other hits over in the States as well. So they're an international band, but they did start in Bells Hill making this kind of punky
I love
pop.
this. And the thing is that I've still never seen them live, because when I was 17, my friend Dougie, he acquired a bottle of Bells, right? Which he'd, from free of charge, although the owners, I don't think, realize this. And it was a big bottle. And we took the bus through to Glasgow to go and see the Soup Dragons in the QM, but we started mixing the whiskey with lemonade on the coach through, and then somehow got it into the Queen Margaret Union, carried on there. I remember the support band called the Cataran, because they were friends of mine. I was the only person dancing, and then the next thing, I put my head up. I was lying on some sort of bench in the Union, and I was like, Dougie came over. I was like, when are the Soup Dragons on? And he's like, they've played.
Yeah.
And I missed it. I basically passed out. At some point I'd kind of raised myself up enough to throw up and then lie down again. And
so this was a tale of teenage woe with
whiskey. And it was like, so I never touched whiskey until that Lefroy epiphany. And that's why, because I was like, it doesn't taste like whiskey, right? I love this. And gradually over the years, I kind of started to move back.
I think it's funny, because obviously I've asked lots of people to be on the podcast, and lots of people have said yes, and there'll be more people saying yes as well. But a few people have said absolutely no, I can't touch whiskey, and it's usually because an experience pretty much like that. Obviously, that doesn't happen to everyone, but some people abuse alcohol in the silliest ways, and whiskey can come into that, especially a sort of Bells or Grouse at that age.
Yeah, well, I had a Grouse experience when I was 13, but I'll not go into that. But it did result in blocking a sink.
This is like a different. It's like a different.
Of course it is.
Drink altogether.
This is what I was trying to explain to people, because I'm also one of the, I guess, about 300 or 400 members of the Scottish Tourist Guides Association. People are like, I don't like whiskey, I had a really bad experience. And I'm like, no, you've just not tried the whiskey that you like yet. And it's the same with tequila. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Mexico, and I love tequila and mezcal, but everyone's had like a bad experience, or everyone's had a bad experience with that Sierra one. It's got like a cap that looks like a plastic sombrero. It's disgusting. It's like petrol, right? And the thing is that what people don't realize is that, much like whiskey, you can actually draw a parallel between tequila and whiskey, where certain sort of cheap tequilas are like blends, and then the 100% agave is like a malt, the equivalent of a malt, and the reposados, or añejo, they're the ones that have matured in the same way that a malt does as well. And so again, I've had people coming around my house going, I can't drink tequila, and I was like, try this one, and they're like, I really like that. It doesn't taste like tequila. And it's like, no, it doesn't taste like the rotten stuff you drank when you're 15 and slammed.
Yeah, my brother's one of those people. He can't drink tequila, but I'm pretty sure if we had a really high end, nicely matured one, he'd give that a shot and probably change his mind. I've got some Soup Dragon stories. I did see them. I didn't pass out. I saw them.
Oh, you lucky man.
I saw them at the Carlton Studios, which sadly is no longer with us. Turned into, luxury flats, no doubt. But a legendary venue in Edinburgh, where I saw Nirvana and Ride and Smashing Pumpkins and Fugazi and all sorts of
Mudhoney in there.
Yeah,
a guy that basically jumped from about 3 meter stack of speakers into the audience. It was mental.
Yeah, well, I saw the Soup Dragons in there. I weirdly enough bought this single, Whole Wide World, which you've chosen to pair with this whiskey, on 45 7-inch vinyl. I was walking past a shop in Edinburgh called Elvis Shakespeare, quite near my house. Saw it in the window, went in, bought it literally about a week ago, and it's a great little single. And my final Soup Dragons connection, one of my producers at the BBC, who does my radio show, is the bass player Sushil Kay Dade, who's also Future Pilot, aka he produces me. So Sushil, the bass player in the Soup Dragons, is my producer.
It's amazing how these things come back. You know, I was in Tenerife on holiday a few years ago, and one of my mates sent me a message. I hadn't heard from him for a while, and he was like, check this out. It was like Hi-Fi Sean with Crystal Waters, and he was like, this is amazing. It's Sean from the Soup Dragons. So I listened to it and I was like, God, this is mental. When Crystal Waters had her hit was the last time I'd been in Tenerife, which was like decades earlier. So I just messaged him on Twitter and he actually sent me a really nice reply. For, you know, a long time I kept trying to get him up to Edinburgh to come and do one of our events. And then, you know, one of the benefits of the pandemic was that I was able to do the interview with him online, because that was the only way to do it anyway, right? He's such a nice man, and he's doing, you know, he's still making amazing music, but he's become like basically like a dance house music DJ. And you know, when he sells all this stuff online, so you know, I bought one of his rare sort of limited edition vinyls and just sort of sent him a picture of Whole Wide World, and then the one
cool.
that he just done, you know. And actually, that's, if anyone's interested in that, is on our I think it's on our Born to Be Wide Facebook. So
well, we'll talk about Born to Be Wide in a second. How are you getting on with that whiskey? Should we go for a dram?
Let's go for the next one. I'm going to try and pace myself, because I am conscious that I don't want to operate any heavy machinery after this.
There'll be no heavy machinery operated in this.
And I don't
podcast.
have a car, so there's no worry about that. So is this the coconut one?
Yeah, we're going to go for coconut, which is a grain whiskey rather than a malt, and it's again a lowland whiskey. It's on the sweet, fruity, and mellow flavor profile. It's called coconut. Let's get some of that.
Do you ever have that thing where you read something and you're actually reading something wrong, but you know, I kept looking at this and thinking it said the Co-op.
Oh, I see what you mean.
They've kind of put a sort of hyphen between the cocoa.
Yeah. So let's do some tasting notes here very quickly. Nosing neat 3 C's came to mind: Caribbean, Calypso, and coconut. Desiccated, toasted, ice cream, and suntan lotion. Chewy heat on the palate neat. Have you ever had grilled black pepper banana on sugared rum toast? With water, oak made a cameo appearance in the form of pencil shavings and pine forests before menthol orange chocolates, banana chips, and chocolate-coated peanuts took center stage. I just love all those descriptions.
Do you? You know what? I've always find them slightly annoying.
Oh, really? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to quite a few of the previous guests that you've had on, and everyone's, oh, yeah, these are great. And I actually, you know, the best descriptions of whiskey come from my girlfriend, Yannicka, who's Swedish, and she doesn't really drink whiskey. I mean, she'll try it, but... she doesn't really drink whiskey, but she has she's got this uncanny ability to sum it up with really, really well, but without she'll smell it, and then she'll nose it, and then she'll actually taste it a little bit. And one night when we'd finished everything else, when we first started going out, we partied quite a lot, and I basically lined up 5 different whiskies for a try, starting with the best whiskey that I've ever drunk in my life, which was from the Society. I got the last 2 bottles, and like a super peaty Ardbeg. I wrote down the number. In fact, if anyone's got one, I'll give you a good price for it. 33.74. And I thought that would scare her off, but it was the opposite. She was like, "Oh yeah, that was her favorite, bizarrely." But but I think the thing with this is that, you know, the descriptions, I tend to look at what the cask is, what the region is, and how old it is, and also just, you know, things like whether it's a refill cask or, you know, what kind of cask it is. So generally, to me, that's what kind of, you know, that's what will attract my attention. But the staff here often, if you tell them what you want or what kind of direction you're going in, you know, if you get one of the ones that are really on it.
You're far more knowledgeable about whiskey than I am, and than the vast majority of people I know, to be quite frank. But I am really indebted to the staff here, because if I come in for an evening, I quite often come and meet someone socially here, or I might even have a little work meeting here at the Vaults in Leith, and you know, I'm sort of, oh, can you guide me through, you know, this dram, this dram, this dram, and this dram, or I'm looking for something that has these kind of flavors, and they're always spot on. I think you might like this.
It's so nice, isn't it? You feel really sort of, you know, that was the other thing when I joined, right? I was young. I was probably the youngest member, at least that when I came in, I always seemed to be the youngest, and, you know, bring in a couple of my pals as guests, and, you know, a couple of whom ended up joining too. But that was always the thing. You never felt you were in a stuffy space, you know, you never felt that you weren't allowed to be here. You know, anyone was able to join. And, you know, when I was in London, when I worked in London, everyone is paying a fortune to, you know, am I allowed to swear? Well, maybe, all right, I'll keep it family, right? Okay, but, you know, it begins with W, and it was like, and ends in Y, right? And the thing is that you know, everyone was a member of these clubs, and they pay a fortune to sort of like get bad service, and you know, just so they could drink for an extra hour or something. And because I was a member of the, you know, the site, there was a tasting room in London, and I'd be like, all right, come to the Whisky Society with me. I'll take you there. Come and drink a nice whiskey, you know. And it was like, it was so much nicer than, you know, these kind of private member clubs and so, but that's because you didn't have to be nominated or any of that.
Well, I always thought it would be very smart. There'd be people in shirts and ties and tweed jackets and so on and so on. And of course there are people like that, but you also get people fairly casually dressed. You don't feel like you've got to be you know, sort of suited and booted.
But there was, I don't know if it's still in place. I don't think it is in Queen Street, but I'm pretty sure it still is here.
I'm sorry, I'm going in for this.
Dive in there. But it's like you know, you weren't allowed laptops or mobiles, and it was just so liberating going into somewhere where, you know, you've not got someone having a chat and on the speakerphone and all that nonsense. This is nice, isn't it?
It is nice, and I wouldn't normally go for a grain whiskey. And I actually, when I was in the society a week ago, I had a really peaty grained whiskey, and it was good, but it was very tasty, but it was quite harsh as well in comparison to some other peated ones that I was trying.
But what fascinates
this isn't harsh at all. This is you know.
What fascinates me with this, right, is what kind of grain it is. You know, is it rye or maize or wheat? Or...
It won't be rye because it would have an R.
Oh, does it? Right. Okay. But
so this is a G10, isn't it?
But I think what this really illustrates is that, you know, those. You know, sometimes barley could come as far away as France, right? I mean, like a lot of distilleries like to make guys locally sourced and stuff. And it's like, well, I want, you know, this, when you visit distilleries, you can kind of start getting those little bits of snippets of information like that, you know, actually some of that barley comes from as far away as France, right? You know, we don't have enough barley in the area to be able to produce this amount of whiskey. But so, you know, the barley, I don't know to what extent really makes a difference. Obviously, how it's malted does, because then you get the peatiness or non-peat or whatever. But the thing with this is that obviously the casks and how long it's been aged is what's really having the influence on this, right? And this is what I really like about this, because to me, I actually prefer the taste of this to the previous one. And
it's a second fill hogshead cask, this one. And again, as I say, a lowland whiskey. But wouldn't you agree, or maybe it's just my palate, with, as you were saying about the fruity prescription, the last one, it's kind of really flavoursome and then it's gone. This one lingers, it stays in your mouth. I've had a sip or two, and it's still there. It's completely zinging the whole inside of my mouth. It does, but
not for that much longer. Give it a little bit more. It's not, you know, I mean, maybe it's just because I'm a bit of a sort of, you know, in some things I'm a bit of an extremist when it comes to whiskies, right? So, you know, if something's lingering on, or it's got something that takes, you know, it stays there for longer. I thought it stays a little bit longer. I really like the taste. I like the roundedness, but again, this one for me kind of went pretty quickly.
No, I've just had another sip. I disagree.
But that's the thing, though.
We agree to disagree.
You know, but this is what's really interesting because it's so personalised.
Yeah.
I remember doing a whiskey tasting up in the Queen Street, and there's this amazing little room. It's round, and it's a guiding colleague of mine, Susie Weigart, who's also on the jury of the society. And I mean, her, you know, I think there's about 30 of them, and they kind of knows and choose which casks they're going to take for that month and stuff, right? She did this whiskey tasting with us, and I was having this, we talked about where it was hitting us on our palate, right? And I was with two German guys, and they were having it in a different, they had a totally different taste.
I've got it
sensation.
right at the front of my mouth and the roof of my mouth, and
Right.
not at all at the back.
Right, that's interesting, because I have got it at the back, you know, and underneath, you know, it's...
Yeah. Well, you know, obviously the point of this podcast, apart from to talk extensively about the whiskey, is to talk about the music as well. What have you paired with this one, then?
Well, I've paired this with the Upsetters' Return of Django.
Classic.
And there's because it's, again, I kind of equated it a bit with the whiskey. I mean, obviously there's all the Caribbean, alludes to all these Caribbean references here. And I was like, right, well, perfect. You know, Lee Perry, basically.
Yeah.
You know, my first musical, let's say, phase in my life was two-tone, right? I absolutely loved ska, right? And, you know, and it used to, I've had arguments later in life with music journalist colleagues and people in music going, hey, you know, well, there's no way for me to find out about other music. It's all right, you came from a city, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, bollocks. This stuff was on the radio. It was, the specials were number one in the charts. You had access to this, so there's no excuse for you listening to bad music.
I think certain men and women of an age will completely agree with you, and myself included. I mean, two-tone and the kind of ska, post-punk revival, if you like, was massive. Madness, the Selector, specials, and all the other, but the beat, I mean, incredible. And
the thing was, is the beat I remember seeing the beat on some Saturday morning children's program performing Stand Down Margaret, right? It was like a song against Margaret Thatcher, and I'm like, this is incredible, right? So you got, and
the producers must have been clued up.
As a kid, I thought they were, this is fantastic, you know, because I was quite politically aware, even though I was a weean, you know. And the thing was, is that ska, I absolutely, you know, I love, right? And you know, obviously the two-tone was UK ska, you know, or really pretty much, you know, around Coventry and London, right? But the thing was that the Return of Django was a song when I was 18, I'd seen some TV programs about Berlin when I was 15, 16, like on the tube, and I was like, I have to go there. So at 18, I went to Berlin with my then girlfriend, and we rented a room in this flat. The building was actually, half the building was condemned, but our sort of landlord who was renting the place, he'd got a kind of skeleton key, so his room was like the bigger one, and we rented the other room from him, right? And this is like, I mean, they still had it was the only building left standing in the street, right? Because of all the bombing of that area of Berlin. I remember phoning him about the flat and about the room, and the answering machine was playing Return of Django, right? And
a reggae classic.
And I love this song, and I'm like, what is this? And you know, now, I mean, I'm a big fan of, I love Spotify, right? And, you know, and I think anyone who moans about Spotify, they certainly have some legitimate grievances, but then moan about YouTube because the royalty's far worse on that, and it's far less transparent, right? But the thing is that now you can find stuff so easily, right? And that sense of discovery when, you know, in the past when you're like, I had no idea what this song was. I just kept hearing it whenever Vincent's answering machine was on, and I was trying to find out about the room. And
so you're already a sort of two-tone ska fan, and then you're hearing this sort of ancient piece of classic reggae, rock steady, classic reggae from the late 60s on an answering machine, and you had to track it down.
And it was happy, you know. It just made, you know, I liked listening to it. It was almost kind of like kind of enjoyed it when he wasn't in, although usually I was calling him because, you know, for something important before I actually moved in, right? But the thing was is that it was a good couple of years before, maybe even longer, before I ever heard this song again, right? And I think I heard it on, you know, Radio 1 in the evening or something. It was like a completely random, you know, encounter
and
with the
you
music.
managed to search it out and get a copy.
Yeah, I find out who it was, and then I've managed to track down. There used to be a place called the Oldies Museum near the Haymarket in West Maitland Street, and they were a bit grumpy and stuff, you know. And I went in there, and it was like I got it on 7-inch, a reissue.
I hope you still got that.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, absolutely.
That'll be worth an absolute fortune.
No,
now.
this was a reissue, so it wasn't an original.
Okay.
Like, but I've got but I mean, for me, the thing is just this sense of triumph of like, all right, here's that song that was on the answering machine.
That's without doing down streaming services and so on. There's something that you don't quite get the same buzz of. If you can just think of a tune, type it into your search engine, and it comes up within a split second.
I disagree.
Finding a single or an album in a shop that you've been searching for years, and then the joy of finding that, I think that's
I've
special.
got a story on streaming that basically is the equivalent, but I could come back to that if we've got time later on. But I found a song that I'd literally been looking for 15 years. Yeah.
And you found it on...
I found it on Spotify.
Oh, great.
And like with a really weird sort of chain of events as well.
And what we should say is to people listening or watching, there is a playlist of all of the Malts and Music tracks that have been selected throughout the first series and ongoing. We just keep adding to the playlist, and it is hugely eclectic. Everyone's got different taste in music, of course, and everyone tastes whiskey in a different way and pairs up the whiskey with music in a different way. So if you're interested, go and check out the full playlist, because it's a brilliant listen, to be honest. So yes, Lee Scratch Perry's house band with the Upsetters. This particular track is from an album of the same name, Return of Django, in 1969. It's a reggae classic. I absolutely love it. And of course, the Upsetters, as well as providing Lee Perry with his house band, they also backed up loads of, like Bob Marley and the Wailers. They were their backing band for loads of their early stuff. In fact, I think some of Bob Marley's best stuff. So a wonderful piece of music. And obviously, it fed into your love of ska as well, and it sort of completed it.
And the whole thing with the description, you know, this is one where the description was appreciated because it kind of, you know, I'd obviously seen the prescriptions, and it was quite, descriptions, Freudian slip referring to the first one, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's quite a challenge sometimes making these pairings, right? Because you obviously sometimes ought to just shoehorn one of your favorite songs in there or something, right? And I think with this, it was like, suddenly, yes, what's Caribbean? What do I love? What's got a memory for me? What ties into, you know, the sort of things that I've you know, heard you and Nicola and Justin and stuff talking about, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to make a slight apology, because I said it was from the sweet, fruity and mellow flavor profile. It isn't. I'm absolutely wrong about that. It's from the juicy oak and vanilla flavor
Interesting,
profile.
because...
Which when I initially paired all 12 flavor profiles with 12 music genres, I actually, if my memory serves me right, I paired with roots reggae. So even though Return of Django isn't quite roots, it's certainly reggae. So you and I are agreeing on that. Let's move on to dram number 3.
Yes, right. Okay, let me put my glasses on again so I can see. Okay, this is fruit alloy, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, let's go. Right, there's the bottle opening. Get some of that sound effect in there, and then a little bit of... Oh, there you go. Glug, 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 as it goes into the Scotch Malt Whisky Society glass. Now, you've mentioned events. You know, for people who are listening, you don't know your life's work. You do all sorts of different things. You're a tour guide. You're a journalist and broadcaster, and you also run a music networking night in Edinburgh called Born to Be Wide, which then went on to spawn a music conference and festival called Wide Days. Tell us a little bit about those things.
What happened is, I mean, I always had an interest in music. I mean, obsessively so, and you know, but also how it worked. So the music industry fascinated me. You know, how people got paid, how everything fit together. And interestingly enough, I mean, even you know, everyone talks about NME as this sort of amazing thing. I always thought the NME was pretty sort of pretentious and shit, right? I like smash hits, And the thing with Smash Hits was that they would cover punk. They would cover how the music industry worked, and it had a real sense of humor that NME ostensibly lacked, right? And I think that this is I remember seeing something that was just like how the payment in the music industry was divided up in a Smash Hits article, you know? And I read about the Dead Kennedys in there, Killing Joke, who we went to see the other night.
Yep.
You know, they described U2 as vile Christian creatures, which then prompted this sort of deluge of enraged messages from U2 fans. But anyway, I had this real interest in how the music industry worked. As you know, I studied languages, but I edited my student paper, so I just got loads of free records, went about 3 gigs a week, and you know, did various things, but learned to be a tourist guide, just thrown into the deep end because my mum was a guide, and I just started picking up tours from her, hence how I ended up here. I then started working as a music industry journalist, covering the music industry, and when that finished, I moved back to Scotland in...
So where were you working in Germany at this point?
I was working in London and in Germany. I had a stint in Germany for 15 months, which is where a friend of mine, Brody, came to visit me, and we went to a night that was run by the president of Universal Music in Germany, and they would just invite people from the local scene to come and play their favorite records. So it could be someone from an indie label or a publisher or a promoter, and they'd just basically be invited to DJ, and everyone would hang out. So Brody and I moved back to...
And nicked the idea.
Yeah, Brody was like, we should do this in Edinburgh. We always have to go through to Glasgow for every launch. Whenever there's something that brings together the music industry, it's always in Glasgow. We should nick this idea. And so in 2004, in the venue, you know, Rest in Peace.
Yeah, one of the great places.
I played the last ever record in the cooler, by the way. And wow. That's one of my sort of proudest moments. And we launched a night called Born to Be Wide, and it was just from this, you know, night that Brody had where some guy, he was hanging out with his mate, some guy gave him a flyer, and his mate tore up the flyer, and the guy was like, "Are you being wide?"
Yeah.
And the guy was, you know, Brody's mate sort of bottled it and was like, "No," and he was like, "I think you are." Yeah. And that was it. And we're just like, right, let's call it Born to Be Wide. That was Brody's idea. And
did I come to the first one?
You did, yes. It was upstairs at the venue. You were there. And
many years ago. What year was that?
2004, early 2004. And,
right. Wow.
That was... God, we do it till 3 a.m. and the idea was to do it fortnightly. I mean, eventually we stopped doing that. And the one of the early ones, there was a guy called John Clark who was mates with Franz Ferdinand, and he assured us that they had agreed to come and DJ after their show at the Liquid Room, and they never appeared. And basically, we sent John out with this Guatemalan friend of mine who didn't drink, so to try and find Franz Ferdinand.
Searching for them right time.
Yeah. But the thing was that's how Born to Be Wide came together, and we started to really sort of, you know, we started to sort of step up in terms of who are getting to come and guest DJ. I mean,
so give us a few of your big names who've played or.
Well, I mean, it was a lot of industry people initially, but so, you know, pretty much everyone from DF Concerts. We, you know, had John Peel's producer and stuff, and then suddenly we were like, where it really turned a corner was like when the couple of guys from Teenage Fan Club came down and came through to do it. And weirdly, it's like we set this up as an Edinburgh night. A Glasgow band who are more famous than anyone in Edinburgh were like, so they did it, and then suddenly all these Edinburgh guys started sort of returning our calls. But we, you know, we had one of the Go-Betweens, Grant from the Go-Betweens, and we had Pat Nevin, who's, you know, now does the best football program on the, anywhere really, like world football on the World Service. And Pat came down, and it turns out that him and Grant were sort of mutual fans. So they had this kind of, you know, love.
Actually, you've just given me an idea. Pat Nevin, if he likes whiskey, we should get him on the podcast.
He doesn't drink.
Oh, doesn't he? Right. Okay.
Nah, he doesn't.
We could pretend. We could put apple juice.
You could have him nose it, which is like the sort of professionals don't drink it either.
He's a huge music fan. Though,
he's a lovely guy as well. He did it with Grant, and then we had the head of MTV Europe, who I knew from my London days. Super nice guy. He also doesn't drink, but he grew up in New Zealand, and so to get out of having to do his cadets at school, he basically joined the pipe band. So he's a mad piper. So, it's incredible because we gave people carte blanche to play whatever they wanted.
Did he play any bagpipes?
Yeah, he started off with bagpipe thing, right? And
I'm not sure I got there that early that week.
It was so good. But that was the thing. There was a guy called Steve McConnell who had a really sort of left field ambient label called Benbecula Records, right? And he started with Killed by Death by Motorhead, right? Someone else started with the Blue Danube. I mean,
well, while we're talking music, let's talk about what you're going to pair with this one. So this is Fruit Alloy. It is part of this one is part of the sweet, fruity, and mellow flavor profile. A couple of the tasting notes here. The panel agreed, a sublime nose, a superb collision of cough medicines and freshly muddled garden herbs. We all found all manner of things like wintergreen, fennel, mango salsa, papaya, apricot, green banana, tinned pineapple, and the leftovers of a big, mushy fruit salad. A fruit bomb in the truest sense. Water-added mint, gum syrup, orange oils, vapor rubs, copper kettles, steel wool, pine resin, and engine oils. Wow, that's some description. The nose is fruity, there's no doubt about it.
It's interesting, right? Because I don't know what it is, right? But I did try this one before, and I was left with a real kind of bubblegum.
Oh, that's funny you say that.
Sensation.
A lot of these tasting notes are suggestive, obviously, and sometimes you agree with them, sometimes you don't. Now,
but I
wouldn't have said bubblegum, but now
I'm not
said
getting
it.
But the weird thing is I'm not really getting it now.
I'm getting it a little bit.
And my girlfriend tried it as well.
I'm going in for a sip.
She went in. She mentioned the bubblegum. I mean, it's maybe when we added water, but it's really interesting.
The nose is completely different to the taste in the front of the mouth, and it does have a kick at the back of my throat. I'm not sure about you, but
swirl it a little bit if you can, because
I might add some water to this.
Yeah. I think it's maybe the water that did it, and I think with some of them that the water just makes such a difference. It can totally change the flavor. Or bring out the flavour actually quite often.
For me, it's just brought out the flavour. I'm getting all the fruitiness, but I'm also getting a kind of Was there slightly metallic? What did they say there? Vapor rubs, copper kettle, steel wool, engine oil.
You're getting a bit spiky, yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of that sort of metallic engine oil kind of taste to it as well. Some people might think that sounds awful, but it's incredibly pleasant. Which tune have you gone for this?
Well, I went for Annie, who's a Norwegian artist, and I did a lot of work in Norway. I mean, I should maybe super fast forward in the, when I was doing Born to Be Wide, I ended up working for a lot of international music industry events, and one of them was called Bilarm, and it's in Norway, and I worked there for 9 years, and I also went over a lot to Norway to DJ. Two of my mates had bars there, so they just thought this is a good way to help me get over there, where it wasn't going to cost me, an arm and a leg. It would just cost me an arm. Yeah. But if you were DJing, you got free beer, so that was like about the same again in terms of your fee, right? So,
right, yeah.
But that's.
I bet if you brought them a bottle of nice whiskey to Norway, they were incredibly.
I always did, So it was, that was it's almost like currency. You take a bottle of whiskey out, and you bring another one for your mates. I discovered Annie through my trips to Norway, and she worked with Richard X, who's a producer, a really accomplished.
Xenomania.
Yeah. Oh, is he Zen Mania as well?
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that explains
the X is
right. Okay, so that's all the Girls Aloud stuff, isn't
yeah.
it? Did they? Oh no, Sugar Babe's the guy from OMD, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But yes, Xenomania is like a production house that does high-end pop music.
That explains so much, because I mean the Girls Aloud stuff's phenomenal as well.
Well, this is Annie Chewing Gum. I mean, it was released in 2004 from her debut album, which has got a great. She's called Annie. Her album was called Animal, which I always thought was quite good. And it is kind of high-end pop music, and the Scandinavians do that so well. And this chewing gum, which I suppose
that's what made me think, right? Because you get these esters, and they're quite common. They reoccur quite a lot in certain whiskies, certain types of whiskies, where recently I've started to find it a bit overwhelming sometimes, where I'm like, this is too much like chewing gum or bubble gum, for my, I think your tastes sometimes shift a little bit as well. But with Annie, this is unfortunately, right, I didn't get a Spotify subscription until they had various West Coast American punk bands on Spotify, right? And a whole load of, there was like a test where I was like, I'm going to get a Spotify subscription when they get this, and this, right?
When they have the circle jerks in the adolescence.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That was what it was. That's what kind of tilted it, right? And but sadly, right, the best version of this song is a remix by a producer from the Isle of Skye called Milo, who had a really successful album, I think about 15 years ago, called
probably around the same time as this record.
Yeah, around the same time as the record. That remix is phenomenal. So you can find it on YouTube, but you can't get it on Spotify. So this, of course, the normal version is great. So anyone checking out the playlist who likes the normal version, go and check out the Milo remix.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I don't think we've ever had on Malts and Music. I don't think we've had anything quite so pop. But I can actually, I can see this whiskey going nicely with that tune. And it is, although it's a shamelessly pop piece of music, it's also beautifully produced, and it's full of ideas as well.
The lyrics are great as well. I mean, the thing is with the lyrics for Chewing Gum, I'm quite a lyric Nazi, I have to admit, right? So, I write about, every 2 weeks I write about an emerging Scottish act for Scotland on Sunday. The other week my friend Derek does it. And the thing is that if I hear really what I call rhyme crimes, it already sort of puts me off artists, right? And I think that in pop there's I suppose people would assume that pop lyrics are always going to be really sort of more score door for love above,
up in
high
the sky, learning to fly,
all of that,
on
right?
my knees begging please. If I hear another song that has that rhyming
Money and Funny, that's another one that I'm just like, I switch off. I'm like, right, go at the bottom of the list, right? So the thing is, when you listen to Chewing Gum, right, it's really funny. She's got another song called I Know Your Girlfriend Hates Me, and there's a great remix of that too. I mean, there's quite a few remixes. I didn't want to use Toxic by Britney Spears. I mean, the listeners won't know this, but you and I we've obviously had these drunken sort of debates about music where I'm like, I'd rather listen to Toxic than anything by Radiohead, right? And or REM for that matter. But you listen to the lyrics of Toxic, listen to the lyrics for Annie, right? They're great, and it's just. There's no rhyme crimes in there. There's nothing in there that is. It's an original. It's like a really original song, right? And
well, I suppose Norway's almost in Scotland, and this is a Highland whiskey, so we can imagine that Annie's making this music in the Highlands while drinking a fruit alloy. It's a great whiskey, but I think we should move on to our last one. And I want to hear a little bit more about. We've talked about Born to Be Wild, the music industry networking night where people DJ and meet and kind of.
It's a social night,
and connect with each other.
And we started doing panels in like 2008. There's a guy called Martin Atkins who's become a good friend of mine, who I met DJing in Norway. So there's a nice link here, right? Mm-hmm. Martin came over, I was DJing, I was like, I needed a break, so he took over for half an hour. And I was like, if you're ever in Edinburgh, come and DJ at Barnaby Wide, you know? And lo and behold, a few weeks later, he was in Scotland, and he was like, can I do a talk? Because he'd written a book called Tour Smart, which is all like this really great practical advice for musicians on tour, right? And I let Martin do the talk, and loads of people liked it. I was like, all right, I'm onto something here. It's a really hard sell getting people to speak to each other and socialize, even though, you know, I always saw myself as a bit of a kind of social lubricant, and I'd introduce people and connect people, right? And Martin did this talk, so we started doing talks at every Barnaby Wide, right? So we did one we did a Norwegian one where, again, like, I brought my mates over from Norway to talk about the Norwegian music scene and industry. Then we did a German one with a German consulate, and then I decided to do Wide Days, right? And I literally, from deciding to doing it, was 7 weeks, right? And
right, wow.
It sold out. And the whole idea with it was that I wanted to create the type of music business convention I would want to attend myself. So we only had 7 acts on. They only played 20 minutes. We put a real emphasis on hospitality, and I took the speakers on the guided tour.
So there's music showcases, there are panels and seminars and conversations, networking events. You know, the audience, if you like, the ticket buyers really feel part of it. But you also do whiskey tasting with it as well, which is quite interesting.
You know, and I think that's, you know, that's something that I really realize people really like. I mean, my business partner Michael, who's started out as a student on Wide Days in 2010, and 3 years later we became business partners. And you know, we host the Scotch reception at the Great Escape, which is a big music festival and industry event in Brighton. And you know, we started doing that in 2017, and we're like, they showed us this picture of a cellar. It's like 400 years old. It's below the hotel. It is, you know, a smuggler's cellar. It was used apparently by a king to get his mistresses up to his palace,
wow.
You know, so they wouldn't be seen. And people really responded to that, and we're like, well, people are, you know, we did the guided tour, but the whiskey tasting was something that we added later when we wanted to do something new. And the Usher Hall, I spoke to someone called Victoria, I was the marketing woman at the council, and she was like, I don't know if she suggested it or I did, but anyway, it was like, I was like, did I just stand there, can we do a whiskey tasting on the stage of the Usher Hall? And she was like, yeah, I think so, I'll check, you know. And
so it came to pass. And then you started doing them at, well, the Great Escape, and I've seen you do a whiskey tasting at
Nouvelle Prague. Look, I've even still got the little booklet that they gave us, you know.
Yeah, that was great. And then you had international, you know, promoters, band members, you know, musicians, live agents, all manner of different sort of parts of the music industry all together at an international event, and you are talking people through whiskey, which in a weird way, not only do they have a dram or two and enjoy that and learn a little bit about whiskey, but they kind of by default learn a little bit about Scotland and a little bit about the Scottish music scene. So it's a real, there's a real synergy to it, you know. It seems to fit perfectly. Booze and music go well together.
And food. You know, we also generally in the Great Escape, we also serve haggis, vegan haggis, chips. I bring down some chippy sauce from what was Rapido, it's not called that anymore, on Broughton Street, and deep fried Mars bars. And I hate to admit it, right, but the deep fried Mars bars are as big a draw as like the whiskey tasting, right? And the
do you know what I'm going to admit as well? Until I went to one of your events, I'd never had a deep fried Mars bar. I thought it was the most repulsive idea going, and I thought it was a real touristy thing, and so on and so on. I tried one, and even though you're probably having your entire calories for the day in one mouthful,
they taste pretty good,
they're
right?
They're good, yeah.
Because you get that saltiness, you know, it's the flavor mix. Because I've not got a sweet tooth, right? But it's like the sweet combined with salty, or sweet combined with spicy. That's a different matter.
Well, do you know what? I'm doing my radio.
If you hadn't done it, I would have. Yeah.
Do you know what? We're going to go into our last dram of this episode of Malts and Music, and this might go quite well with a deep fried Mars bar. I don't know. I mean, Maybe that's another concept for a podcast. Which whiskies go well with deep fried Mars bars? Anyway, we're on to Midsummer Night's Dream, which is part of the deep, rich and dried fruits flavor profile. Here are some couple of tasting notes for you. This was dark, mysterious and outright scary. Banana mummified in a sarcophagus wrapped in linen with the ritual of embalming papyrus with figs, dates and cloves as grave goods. How good is that? That sounds brilliant. Very smooth, very sweet and very spicy, maybe like a nocino de noix. Or a nocino de noix, I'm not sure how you say that actually. A fortified wine with green unripe walnuts picked before the 24th of June, known as the celebration of Midsummer Night.
Here's the other thing with when I showed my girlfriend these tasting notes, right? She was like, not only has she got the best
palate,
right? But she also pointed out that Midsummer is the 21st of June, yeah?
And what did they say?
24th.
Oh,
exactly. Yeah.
Well,
that hasn't stopped it selling out because I try to get a bottle of it and it's gone completely.
Right.
You know, but yeah, point of order. And
this is a Speyside, a famous distillery as well, which I'm sure people can go and discover. It is 63.3%,
and it's my favorite. This is delicious.
So we've had the Soup Dragons, we've had the Upsetters, Return of Django, we've had Annie and Chewing Gum. What is your fourth and final pairing with this Midsummer Night's Dream?
I absolutely love this one, right? It's rich. It's you can taste the sherry in there. It stays. It leaves you with a. You can still taste it afterwards, but it's that sort of. You want to carry around that taste for as long as you can, and look at the color of it. You know.
Oh yeah, it's the
I mean, I feel
white.
a bit like that. You know that bit in Spinal Tap where he's like looking at the guitars and stuff, and it's like, can you hear it?
Yeah.
But it is.
I mean, if there was a dram to outline this flavor profile, deep, rich, and dried fruits, it's got to be this, because just look at that. It's a sort of treacly, lovely, rich color.
The colors come from, there's different things that influence it.
Look at you. You've got a little sip in each one.
I mean, it was like. You're
sorry.
I've got. You can have some of mine.
There's a running theme to these podcasts, and it's that I always finish the whiskey.
Yeah, but the thing is that you're seasoned at this, right? So whereas if I end up getting too pissed, I'll forget what I want to say, right?
Fair enough.
I've been really excited about doing this, right? So this is first fill, right? So when you first fill Oloroso, right? So that means that you're going to get more color from it, right? And the other ones, if it's a refill or it's, you're not. And it's also, if you go to some distilleries, they actually show you different examples with the color, what type of cask they've been in, first fill, second fill, and, whether it was a bourbon or a sherry. And this is what I like about it so much, because you see that contrast. So it's already that gets me excited. Now, some distilleries cheat. They put caramel in. They never tell you that. Someone told me that in confidence, right? But not about their own distillery. Obviously, if you go abroad and you buy whiskies, often they're legally required to mention it. But that whole thing about, it's just malted barley, whiskey, water, and yeast. It's like, yeah, bollocks. You put caramel in that, and I can see it I can see it when I bought one in the duty free. But I think that this is the beauty of this. There's no reason for them to put caramel in this, because it's just for the society.
It's a first fill Oloroso,
and it's great.
Well, the nose is utterly amazing. But it's the most potent nose of the four drams we've had today. But to me, it has a saltiness as well as the sort of dried fruits.
Got so much going on. It's delicious.
I mean, it smells like it's like a Christmas pudding, but with this kind of slightly salted caramel. Very trendy at the moment. Everything's salted caramel. Yeah. But I'm a fan of salted caramel, and it has a salted caramel kind of nose. But I'm going in for a sip.
I picked a piece of music for this, which is I think the song's 6 minutes. It really envelops you. You know, when I first heard this, it was a while back, so it was on my iPod, right? I found it on eMusic. I think it was Justin Curry that was talking about how he had this eMusic subscription, and it really, I was listening to it in my kitchen when you did the podcast with him, and it really brought a smile to my face. I was like, oh yeah, I had exactly the same thing, and I didn't have the mega subscription, but even finding 20 tracks, it was download subscription. You downloaded 20 tracks, all independently released, right? So it was quite left field stuff, and I discovered so much amazing music. But this particular track is by a duo called Plastilina and Mosh, who were two young guys when I met them from Monterrey in the north of Mexico. I lived in Mexico City for a while.
That's it. You mentioned your tour guiding and so on, but you've got quite an international profile as well. You've lived in Germany and you're fluent in German. Your mother's German, and you're also fluent in Mexican Spanish as well.
Yes. With a bit of a Scottish accent, but like I went over.
Do they pick that up?
No. Well, it's funny. The thing is, they because I speak.
¿Cómo te llamas, Paul?
It's like because I speak total Mexico City slang, right? I went over there speaking Spanish like a Spaniard, and within a month I had to drop that and just adapt. But I had like really good teachers, and I went to a market to get some music where they just people exchange bootleg tapes, and it's like made pals with a couple of punks there, and they're still friends with them now, and this was in 1990. And so the thing is that I've got this Mexican Spanish that these guys taught me, or just listening to them, and I moved back there. I was there as an exchange student. I moved back there and wrote the first article in the world about Mexico City's club scene and for DJ Magazine in the mid-90s, and
and Mexico City's hip now, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's one of the hippest cities in the world, and yet it until fairly recently was probably not seen as that kind of. It was probably seen as quite a dangerous place.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is that the worst that's happened to me is I got pickpocketed, but it's. Out of all the times I've been there, that's pretty decent. I've been robbed off a video camera in Barcelona. I think far more likely to get ripped off.
I've been
Barcelona.
to Mexico City a few times. I'm lucky to have been there, and it has a strange sort of aura to it because it was initially built on waterways, and then the waterways were drained. And so it has this kind of humid, murky feel to it.
It's amazing. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I mean, like Mexico City is like a home from home for me. And in the 90s when I was there, I met these guys, Plastilina and Mosh, found this track on eMusic, and it's them teaming up with an Argentinian singer from a band called Babasónico, and it's just this kind of really sleazy.
I speak a bit of Spanish, but my Spanish wasn't good enough to understand exactly what the person was saying.
Hilarious.
Probably for the better, maybe.
I mean, it's not the sort of thing that necessarily means that you wouldn't get played on the radio, but it's just got
Serge Gainsbourg style.
Yeah, it's got this groove, and what I love about it is it just kind of. It envelops you, and that's what the taste of this does. It lingers. It's I had to keep listening to it because on repeat. It's rare for me to do that, but occasionally a song will do that, and it just hooks me. And I love that. I love this whiskey for that. I'm actually doing an online event soon. I don't know when this goes out, but it'll be either if it goes out after the 26th of April, then hopefully I'll have done the event by then, and it'll be a massive success. But the thing is that I've doing this with Wales. So Y Days has a partnership with an event called Focus Wales. So there's 15 Scottish music professionals, 15 Welsh, and 30 Mexicans, and I'm doing it with in partnership with La Roma Records, which is an amazing record shop in Mexico City. You've been there.
I bought loads of records from that shop in Mexico City. Yeah,
and
it's exciting.
My friend Cesar's also got a label, and so we're, it's that thing of what I love about, those connections you make in life, these friendships that you build everywhere, that then you suddenly find yourself in a situation where you can bring all that together, and it's the whole idea, and the whole thing around why we started Born Be Wide was to bring people together, and we do that with Wide Days as well. It's like we generally kind of invite people we like to come and speak.
Yeah, well, I think that's what maybe puts Wide Days and Born to Be Wide aside from other, conferences and industry events, is that people are really welcome, and there's a sense of community and friendship and sort of, love and fun to it, rather than just making money. Mexico, Wales, and Scotland coming together, the music industries of those countries and sharing ideas and hopefully turning each other on to new music is great. But the power of the internet, let's say that as well. The fact that you can do that, they'll be in Mexico, people will be in Wales, and people will be in Scotland, all together communing online, which is great. This particular track, Plastilina Mosh is the band, Paso Fino is the track, a Mexican duo loved by Beck. Beck championed them. He actually invested money in them, which is really interesting. And they were continually compared to the Beastie Boys as well, even though they're quite different stylistically. I think it was maybe the idea of what they were doing, bringing all these ideas into their music.
Well, there was a band from the same time called Control Machete, who you might know from the Amores Perros soundtrack.
All right.
And the Si Senor is one of the main tracks on that soundtrack. They were actually produced by, I think, the Beastie Boys engineer. So they're much more in that Beastie Boys Cypress Hill vibe. But they're also amazing, by the way. Like, you should check them out.
No, I will. The song is, as you say, kind of rich. It goes perfectly with this dram. You occasionally do tour guiding, not so much in Mexico, obviously, but around Scotland, and you go occasionally to distilleries as well, don't you?
Yeah,
without naming them specifically, it must be quite.
I think that the thing is that I'm sure it's okay to name distilleries. The main thing is that these numbers that we've got for the distilleries. Everyone in the know knows that if you look online, you can find out which number corresponds to the distillery. But with that, I totally respect the reason that the society doesn't publish them. There's a really good reason, is that distilleries will release an amazing cask, which doesn't necessarily conform to their flavor profile, so they don't want people sort of associating them with something different. But distilleries, individual distilleries, I've been really lucky in that with my guiding work, I get to go to distilleries and have tours, right? And honestly, every time I go, I learn something new. This is what I love about whiskey, is that it's limitless. You never stop learning, and I kind of like that with doing panels and hosting talks and putting together music industry events. I've never gone to a panel where I didn't learn something new.
Well, doing these podcasts and further immersing myself in the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, I'm learning. Even chatting to you, Olaf, I'm learning things. I've learned loads of stuff just from this podcast, and my whiskey journey continues. And with every step, I sort of feel more enriched. I learn more. I obviously taste loads of delicious whiskies, but I learn more about life, I think. That
combination as well it is so. For me, I really despise this speculation with whiskey, right? It really, really pisses me off, right? I'm going to say that. And I think that one of the really upsetting things about whiskey suddenly getting this massive pop. I love the fact that more people are being turned on to whiskey. I don't love the fact that you suddenly can't get something that was really nice because it's,
£10,000 a bottle.
Yeah. Well, you can't get the Macallan that I grew up with, where you'd say that people have if they had 2 bottles of malt whiskey, they'd have their favorite whiskey and the regular Macallan, right? You can't get that here anymore. That's, that to me is it's a real shame. It's like that thing where, you know, you see it on investment websites. And, I'm
right, yes.
in a
So
website.
I often ask the guests, or try and allude to it in some way. Is whiskey a kind of? Is it about the social aspect of it? It's obviously about the taste of the delicious liquor, but I mean, is it a social thing or is it a status thing? Is it?
Well,
I get the impression that you're like, no, the status thing can
I
get
bought
in the
the
bin.
last 2 bottles of that amazing whiskey that the society had, right? And I bought one for me and one for a friend of mine who had a bar in Oslo. Now, he made the mistake of saying that he didn't think any whiskey under £100 is worth drinking. He was just basically being a poser.
Being a snob.
So at that point, I was like, right, well, then you won't be having that one that cost me 62 quid, right? I'm so glad I kept it. I've shared that whiskey with more people than I can count, right? Because I'm like, you like peaty whiskey, this is the best whiskey I've ever had, right? If I'd kept it to myself, what's the point of that? I can share a magic, I can share this incredible taste that they're not going to get anywhere else unless they're lucky enough to have had one of the, you know, whatever 200 or 300, 400 bottles that were done, and they know someone that has it. And that to me is it's like music. If you're into something, you want to be able to share it, right? What's the point of it otherwise? And I think this is what's really interesting, because when you find someone that likes it as much as you do, it's a wonderful feeling. You know, when you turn someone on a piece of music that, you know, some folk, it's not my cup of tea, or I don't like that sort of music. It's like, fine, well, it's wasted on you then. But you find the person that does, and it's like, it's a connection, you know. And that's the whole thing around both music and whiskey. It's about that connection. It's like, you know, one of the things that I forgot to mention, I just have to put it in here, is that getting people onto the stage of the Usher Hall. Andrew Usher was a distiller. He's a pioneering distiller. That was built with whiskey money, right? And ironically enough, for the first few years it was open, it was dry. They weren't allowed to sell alcohol.
In the Usher Hall?
Yeah, and as far as I know, I hosted the first whiskey tasting on the stage of the Usher Hall. And I'm so proud of that. I mean, it's such a great thing. And but again, it's like I did it with like 30 people that basically got to, you know, I could connect them with the venue. The last time I'd done it twice. The last time I did it, the James Bruce, who books all the council venues in Edinburgh, he did a tour as well. So there's that added thing. But at each point, what you're doing is you're bringing people together, and you're sharing something amazing.
Well, that seems like the perfect way to end the podcast. Olaf Furniss, good luck with Wide Days. Thanks for chatting to me. We've heard the Soup Dragons, we've heard the Upsetters, we've heard Annie, and we've heard Plastilina Mosh. And we've drank some great whiskey. It's an absolute pleasure.
One last thing, 19th to the 21st of May, if it goes out before then, all our live shows are open to the public. There's some amazing music. We've got last night is a festival takeover from the Breakout West Festival in Canada, so you can come and check out some.
So people who are just in Edinburgh can come along to the festival.
Yeah, just go on
free of charge.
Yeah, you just have to sign up. So widedays.com, and man, I hope we can get another one. I know this is sold out, but hopefully they've still got a bit.
Well, I've already tanned mine.
Oh, man, this could possibly be the very last one of it. So I better do it
with an empty glass. Slange.
Thanks very much, Vic.
Cheers, Olaf.